Natasha Adams, Heritage Museum.
Jason Kistler, IT Director.
Amanda Christensen, HR Director.
Nathan Christensen, Committee Board Member.
Aaron Tyler, Committee Board Member.
Marilyn Morton, Council President.
William Woodward, Committee Board Member.
Nancy Lodge, Citizen.
Kathy Martin Wallace, City Council.
Sarah Jones, City Council. Jessica Porter, Committee Member.
Shannon Core, City Council.
Miranda Gear, Committee Member.
Patrick Bodley, Library Director.
Gerald Fisher, Public Works Director.
Ken West, City Manager, and if I may, Councilor Roden will be joining us by phone or,
She is on Zoom right now.
okay, Zoom, and if she can make it in person, she will. It may be a little bit late. Councilor Schwartzler had a family emergency at the last minute, and she may be unable to join us, or she may be able to join us via phone.
Bob Mason, Police Chief.
Rory Shaw, Committee Chair.
And I think Nathan has a statement he has to make.
And Councilor Morton and Nancy.
What?
I'm not paying attention.
Nancy, do you have something to disclose?
Oh. Yes, I'd like to read this statement of Library Board Member lack of bias script. I'm a member of the Independence Library Board, and as such, I support the Independence Library Board and have spent time working with the Library Department and library staff to better the Independence Library. My role as a Library Board member will not have caused any prejudice in regard to the proposed cuts to the Library Department. I understand my responsibility as a decision maker, and I take my role seriously. I know that I need to set aside any personal views I may have to remain unbiased during this process. I am confident in my ability to sit impartially and listen to the information being provided, and when asked to make a decision on the budget, I will set aside any personal views and evaluate, discuss, and vote solely based on the budget document, applicable state law, and information provided by staff.
Thank you, Nancy. Councilor Morton?
Yes, I have a similar disclosure. I am a member of the Friends of the Independence Library for about 100 years. And as such, I support the Friends of the Independence Library and have spent time working with the Library Department and library staff to better the Independence Library. My role as a Friends of the Library member will not have caused any prejudice in regard to the proposed cuts to the Library Department. I understand my responsibility as a decision maker and take my role seriously. I know that I need to set aside any personal views I may have to remain unbiased during this process. I am confident in my ability to sit impartially and listen to the information being provided, and when asked to make a decision on the budget, I will set aside any personal views and evaluate, discuss, and vote solely based on the budget document, applicable state law, and information provided by staff.
Thank you, Councilor Morton. Nathan?
Yeah, I have the same exact script that Nancy had from the library board. I also will set aside any personal views, evaluate, discuss, and vote solely based on the budget document, applicable state law, and information provided by staff. I would like to ask a clarifying question. Who gets to determine whether or not anybody in here is biased or not?
That would be a question that would be raised by someone at the time of discussion, after discussion, at any point in time. However, it's very clear from the statement by all three that you are all three very sophisticated members of the committee. You all three understand, and that you're all three able to set aside any bias that you may have, if you have any.
I'll make good judgment.
Did you also want to make a familial?
Yeah, I said this is technically just a recess, so I said it at the first, but
When in doubt,
my wife is an hourly employee.
Thank you, appreciate that. Excuse me.
No, you're fine. Okay, let's move on to item number 3 on the agenda. That is the approval of the minutes from last week, 5/10/2023.
I have something I wanted to add on that. There was no mention of the question about the library cuts in the notes, in the minutes. I think that should be in there as kind of a big deal. I think that we were informed there's nowhere to take money from to avoid the cuts at the library. I just want it noted in there.
I think several people mentioned library sometimes during that meeting.
So it should be mentioned in
captured.
here.
Yeah.
Madam Chair. Our recorder, Amanda is filling in for our recorder, so with your approval, once the recorder is back, we'll have her adjust these minutes. We can bring them back next year.
Okay, but before we decide on approval of the minutes, I just want to make my own personal notes, if that's okay? Okay. I found the minutes to be fairly accurate, like you said, Councillor Joe, without mention of discussion on the potential library cuts. And I did find a couple of typographical errors that I will put forth, Amanda, for you to pass on. Do we have any other questions or comments on the minutes from the previous meeting? I will entertain a motion to approve. No, I'm sorry, I will not entertain a motion to approve. I'm sorry. Okay, item number 4 is review of agenda. We do have a change on your agenda. Item number 5, open for public questions, should state open for public comment. However, this is for comment that is not already listed further down in the agenda. So if you have comment that you would like to make regarding the fiscal budget proposed, that will come under section 8, item 2. Okay? Number 6, review of committee questions submitted by staff and staff responses.
Thank you. Chair, if I may, I have some preliminary information that I think will help the committee, and then we'll move into the questions, if that's acceptable.
Yes.
Okay. So I want to clarify some misinformation that has been printed, and I have quite a list of things. So please let me know if you can't hear me. I will try and project as much as I can. Just if you can't hear me, this. And I will be sure to project as much as possible. So, budget document presentation at the meeting. Historically, the budget document has always been presented at the first meeting. Last year was an anomaly to the norm, and it was received early. This year, we'd hoped again to provide the budget document early, but we did not have a finance director. The 3 main jobs of the finance director is the audit, manage the staff, and the budget. As you can imagine, without a finance director, creating the budget took some time. Our finance director left to a higher paying position at a critical time during the budget preparation. Chief, Gerald, and I had to base our first draft budget on the prior finance director's formulas and assumptions. Shortly before the budget meeting, we were able to contract with one of the best financial consultants in the state, Rob Moody. You met him last time. I failed last time to give you a little bit of his background. He is a partner with Marina & Company, one of the top auditor firms. Prior to that, he was a partner with Plan B Consulting. Prior to that, he was a partner with Talbot, Corvola, and Warwick. He graduated with a bachelor's in accounting from Western Washington University, and he is a certified public accountant. We have not had a certified public accountant on staff for decades. It's very nice to have that consultant with us. He reviewed all of the formulas and assumptions that we relied on from the prior finance director. He had to correct many of those formulas and assumptions. And remember, it was only shortly before the budget meeting that he came on board. So with the time needed for that review and correction to those formulas and assumptions, and then the revision to the document, it was literally the morning of the first meeting that his firm was printing the final budget. So an early provision of that document was simply not possible, given the circumstances that we were dealing with at the time. There was also discussion about having one meeting instead of multiple meetings. This was an option. As you saw from your agenda last time and this time, you have an option. Finalize, finish in 1, finalize and finish in 2, or set it for a date certain and have 3. These are options. We try very hard to be sensitive to the fact that every one of you are volunteers. You have spouses, you have families, and you have jobs, and you may not want to give up multiple evenings. That said, again, you had options. You chose to have a second meeting. You have an option tonight, finish or set a date certain. Again, options. There's been a lot of discussion about our non-sustainable general fund. There are a lot of questions about that, so a little bit of preliminary information. This was years in the making. We showed you the video, starting in 1996 and 1997 with Measure 5 and Measure 50. 1996, years in the making. With the slow strangulation of the general fund due to Measure 5 and 50, the city was for years arbitrarily transferring monies from the utilities to the general fund to mask a shortfall of operating costs in the general fund. It is this arbitrary, non-calculated transfer that was not best practices. With Gerald coming on board 1 year ago, approximately, 2 years ago, approximately, and then me coming on board a year later, you now had two experienced professionals who saw this issue and knew that the city's finance department was not following best practices. The financial consultant confirmed this, and he will be an integral part of our team as we move forward with fixing this issue and finding an experienced finance director who will move us into the future with these best practices in place. Last year under Chief, the city took that first step to correct this lack of best practices. They talked about it and they informed you that was the first step. This year, we took the second and final step by moving to 100% calculated allocations. With new experienced professionals in place, we saw the problem and we're here to fix the problem. But it is a structural deficit, which means that it will not correct itself over time. It will just continue to get worse. I've been here 10 months. It is literally impossible to correct a non-sustainable general fund in 10 months. It took decades to get where you are. It is going to take years to correct the problem that I inherited. If we don't start reducing costs and increasing revenues, we will be looking at even more significant cost-cutting measures next year. It will take years and a lot of work by the council, my staff and I, to correct the non-sustainable general fund. But staff and I are dedicated to doing the right thing and correcting the financial slide. And we're looking to our community for support in doing that. We talked about other jurisdictions. Remember I said in that first meeting that it's not just us. Almost every city is struggling. Not every, but almost every city is struggling with the slow strangulation of the general fund revenue from Measure 5 and 50. City of Beaverton just announced that economic conditions like rising inflation and expenses outpacing revenues have exacerbated financial strain. Does that sound familiar? It's almost exactly what I said last week. They then went on, as a result, fiscal year 2023-24 budget development includes recommendations that are being considered to address a $10 million general fund shortfall and a $1 million library fund deficit, and immediate steps towards a path of long-term sustainability that includes cutting 9 library staff positions citywide. That should sound familiar too, on a smaller basis. The city of Salem just announced a possible $11 million budget shortfall. The city's grown, but the revenues have failed to keep pace with the growing demands. That should sound familiar too. I said that last week. City Manager Staley noted that Salem is not alone. Cities across Oregon are facing similar structural imbalances between revenues and expenditures. He pointed to the property tax measures from the 1990s capping tax revenues, Measure 5 and Measure 50. We are fortunate to have the ARPA funds in order to carry us over the last couple of years, and it's supplemented our fund balance. And they've allowed us to avoid this difficult conversation for the last couple of years. That's what the city manager of Salem said. That should sound familiar too, because it's exactly what I said last week. There are questions on the department cuts and the processes. We had a little bit of discussion on policy versus operations. The department cuts process is operational, not policy. But I know that this is a little different for you all. I know you haven't had those discussions about policy versus operation. So I'm going to take a little bit of time And I'm gonna explain the department cuts and how we went through it, because I know you're interested and I know it's important. As I noted above, Bob, Gerald, and I had to pick up the threads of a complex budget and try to pull it together when our finance director left for a higher paying job. When we realized the depth of the unsustainability, which was at the time $1.2 million, we asked every department head to come into the meeting with their suggestions as to what could be cut from their budgets. Each department head provided us with their recommendation for cuts. After those cuts, we were at about a $700,000 shortfall. We cut deeper in all departments, which including looking at personnel reductions. Every department head had the opportunity to talk about those personnel reductions. The library has become a point of everybody's interest. Our library director suggested the library be closed on Saturday and open on Monday, because the Monmouth Library is open on Saturday and closed on Monday. With the trolley, it provides an opportunity for our people to have services 6 days a week. Also, we need to note that the Monmouth Library is only open 5 days a week, which is where we're moving. Because the general fund is unsustainable, these cuts are only in the general fund department, not in water, not in sewer, not in tourism and events, not in those sustainable funds. So yes, there may be employees coming in those sustainable funds. There are not in the unsustainable funds. That needs to be separated. Two completely different things, sustainable versus unsustainable. In the general fund, which is what we're talking about, again, not public works, there's parks, which is 100% general fund, library, 100% general fund, police, which is 98% general fund, and planning, 90% general fund. There are more, but those are the larger. We looked at those funds. Then we looked at what is considered as essential service departments. The Oregon revised statutes state that to receive shared revenue from the state, we must provide 4 or more of the following services. These are considered essential services: police, fire, street, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, planning, zoning, and subdivision control. What is not an essential services for state shared revenue? Parks, library, and museum. So we looked at those non-essential places first. And I'll note it later. So while trying to find other places where we could reduce personnel to help with the shortfall, we looked at those non-essential service places first. The library is the only non-essential department with multiple employees where the remaining positions could cover those that were eliminated. 3 part-time positions, which is roughly equivalent to 1 full-time position, was eliminated. We also eliminated 1 position in finance, 1 position in economic development, and half a position in police. And on a final note, the fire district is not a part of the city. And the city received no funds from the levy that just passed. The sheriff's department is not a part of the city, and the city receives no funds from the levy that just passed. Now we're going to move to the questions, and I think Bob, you have the first one.
I do. So we had 2 people that wrote in and provided questions, and we will go through them one by one. I'll read the question, I'll read the answer, and then we'll just move through the list. First question. In your proposed budget, what is the definition of the column header, in quotes, ESTYE? I assume this designation means estimated year in. If so, what methods and tools were used to calculate this projection? This answer comes from Rob, who was unable to be here tonight, but he sent it in, and I will read his answer. Estimated year in does indeed, ESTYE does indeed refer to estimated year in the budget document. The methodology for estimating these amounts was varied depending on the account. For personnel services, we were able to mostly take the 6-month actuals and annualized amounts due to the routine nature of the charges. We did adjust for known changes such as vacant positions, etc. For materials and services, we started with a simple annualization process, then tailored for the account. An example being property taxes, mostly all received in November, insurance is all paid in July, etc. Estimates were provided by respective department heads and then reviewed by finance and updated, discussed as necessary. Question number 2. On page 16, city leadership described how they halted prior year's practices of interfund transfers and loans from enterprise funds to the general fund, and how stopping this practice resulted in a significant shortage of revenue for the general fund. Please prepare a detailed report on the total value of this general fund deficit and how much each department shared in contractions to make up that deficit. Example, how was the pain distributed? Please include dollar amounts and proportionality to the total deficit. Answer, and this, I will start this answer. So I do not have a detailed report, but to be clear, the department heads were included in the discussions of how to reduce their departments and made the decisions that you see in the final budget document. Not necessarily how much to reduce, but where to reduce. The process that was taking place was more one of determining where we could legitimately shift costs out of the general fund and into the enterprise funds for things we had not directly allocated before. We looked at things like computer software, employees' time that specifically serve enterprise funds, janitorial, time spent working events. This was a total change in the way we approached the budget. And we did this while also compiling our budget with known expenses for the coming year and reducing everywhere we could while striving to not compromise service or our core functions as a city.
And then I'll follow up because it's always a good training to discuss operations versus policy. And that question moves into operations. And as a reminder, operations is what we do, policy is what you do. So we're happy to answer the questions, but just remember that your policy, your high level, when it comes to line items and how the sausage is made, that's operations. But all of that said, with what Bob provided and then what I provided in my preliminary information, I believe we've answered that to the best of our ability.
Question 3. What are the GASB rules and state laws governing transfers, loans from enterprise funds to general funds? What are the limitations and guidelines for such transfers? And because we're not supposed to use acronyms, I will say GASB stands for General Accounting Standards Board. This answer is from Rob, because I quite honestly had no idea. So the GASB sets rules for financial reporting for government entities, which in turn often drives the accounting and recording of transactions. There are no specific rules or laws governing interfund transfers from utility funds, like water, sewer, or stormwater, to the general fund. What the city was doing was simply arbitrarily transferring monies from the utilities to the general fund to mask a shortfall of operating costs versus general fund revenues, a subsidy of those operations from funds that had money. Because the utility funds are sourced with ratepayer monies, there is an expected stewardship of those monies that they will support utility operations and capital needs. That is the promise made to ratepayers when establishing rates for water, sewer, and stormwater. There are certain support costs that are necessary to operate the utilities, and some of those costs, like payroll and accounting and legal, are captured in the general fund and should be reimbursed by the utilities fund on benefit received. Similarly, a franchise fee as a percentage of revenue is charged to all utilities operating in the city, and this includes everything from phone to electrical, natural gas, cable, internet, and is also charged to the city utilities. Beyond those justified transfers to the general fund, it is arguable that any additional transfers to the general fund is without merit and not in direct support of the utilities or to the benefit of the ratepayer. The city has recently worked to realign transfers to the general fund with that stewardship position to ratepayers. That was Rob's answer. Any follow-up? I saw you guys chatting over here.
No, actually, mine is later on.
Okay.
kind of touches on some of that.
Question 4, if such transfers are lawful and have established guidelines, what was the justification for stopping such transfers so completely and immediately for the 23-24 proposed budget? This is my answer. Again, we started this process last year when we reduced the overhead allocation down to $703,910, when previously it was well over $2 million a year. Can be found on budget page 17, and we did cover that last week, but if anyone needs it pointed out, I'll show you where it is. This was something that, again, we started last year because I was told it was inappropriate, and as a team, we worked to try and get it to zero, and it just wasn't gonna happen. So we made a decision to get it as far down as we could and wait for a new city manager, because we were in a city manager recruitment at the time. This year, we completed the rest of the allocation work that made the allocations much more defendable, and in turn, stopped the practice of balancing the general fund with utility funds completely.
And the one thing that I wanted to add to that is that by doing this, it makes our budget transparent. It makes it fair for all the funds. It protects our ability for bonding in the future for sewer projects, water projects. And if we hadn't done it, what ends up happening is you still have to do those projects. So if we don't have the money in those funds to do the projects, that equates to significant rate increases to cover the projects.
Ken, just to recap, the current shortfall is 700K?
We actually, Counselor, we worked really hard, and we were able to get it down to where I think we have about $100,000 in the black. Am I correct with that? I think that's about, yeah. We were looking at having to try and come up with 300,000. And then Rob found a calculation error from the prior person, and he became my favorite department head because we had $100,000. And so we were not in the red. So this year, we are okay, this year.
Based on the proposed cuts?
Based on what you see in front of you.
And wrapping into that, you know, she talked about every department head going through their budget and doing cuts. So parks is in my area. We cut $198,500 of potential expenses, needs for the park system. Those included contracted maintenance of the parks, master gardener requests for the Mount Fur Park, and also equipment replacement, like replacing old and worn out benches, tables, etc. We had in there, but I didn't put it in the original budget, a need of almost $100,000 to address the failing parking lot that is over by the pavilion, but I pulled that out. And then when we got into the budget, I ended up cutting $198,000 plus out of the parks budget just to make what the rest was going on happen. So each department head did the cuts that they need to get to where we're at today.
Question 5, this one's yours. For each of the city's department directors, what, if any, community services that directly support the 2040 vision plan will be materially and significantly degraded by the proposed 23-24 budget? If any such degradations are projected, what is the dollar amount by department that would most efficiently mitigate those risks to the 2040 vision plan?
All right, settle in, folks. Long answer. Here we go. So let's clarify. The 2040 plan is not a plan that is to be completed in 1 year or even just a couple of years, but rather is hoped to be implemented by 2040 as funding allows. The council goals then focus on those things that are most important in the next 2 years, again, as long as funding allows. So looking at the 2040 plan, the core values, which are found on page 5, this is core to the city. Core values state that the sound financial planning backing all community initiatives, ensuring that public dollars are wisely and prudently invested. The Vision 2040 states that fiscal responsibility is one of the core values. We're focusing on core values. The change to finance to include those best practices we've discussed brings the city fully in line with this core value. That said, we are still able to focus on the following projects. Game-changing projects. This is the next highest level. Every game-changing project will remain in place, including Southern Multimodal Transportation Access Strategy and Arterial. That is mainly grant funded. Downtown Parking Management Plan, grant funded. Independence Housing Strategy, grant funded. Recreation for All. This will be grant funded because the general fund doesn't have any funding. Local medical facility and health services. That is a support by the city, and our mayor has taken the lead on that, and he is making great strides. Workforce training and skills development, grant funded. Early childhood and pre-K programs, which, if you look at it, relates to fully licensed childcare. We continue to look for opportunities and grants to move that forward. Focus area plans, next level down. Dynamic local economy, year-round community events, tourism and events. That is a revenue fund. There's funding there. Center for Entrepreneurship, grants. Vibrant Livable Places, page 10. Central Plaza redevelopment, grant funded. Riverview Park extension, grant funded. Monmouth Street revitalization, small neighborhood centers, and independent sustainability plan do not have current funding, but we will continue to look for appropriate grants. Safe, healthy people, mental health services. The city continues to coordinate with the school district for the SRO program, and the city continues to work with Polk County to provide mental health services. Homelessness prevention and services coordination. We still have a counselor on the Mid-Willamette homelessness.
Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance.
Thank you. The city manager is still on the Polk County homelessness pilot project. And we still have a counselor who, with staff assistance when needed, is working toward an age-friendly community. All of those things are within that fund, or that focus. Thriving schools and youth. The city continues to support alignment with school district goals. And through our police department is exploring options to improve the safety and security of students outside of school facilities. And I want to note here, this provides us the authority to increase police officers and patrols, which we haven't been able to do. We haven't been able to increase our officers or patrols because we do not have the funding in our general fund. And I think, Chief, our levels are at 2017 levels, is that correct?
Yes.
An inclusive, involved community. Partnership with Monmouth, WU, and other local agencies. We continue to meet and work with other agencies. A very good example is the regional water treatment facility that we're working on, and the resource center that when Chief was sitting as interim, they put in place with Polk County, Monmouth, and Independence. Communication and outreach, that is city-led. And Emmanuel, our communications coordinator, also known as our communications manager, those are interchangeable by the way, is doing a great job. And he has been getting all of the information out. Diversity and leadership. We are working on a leadership project with Monmouth. We are working on onboarding training for all new members of boards, committees, and commissions. And the mayor is working with staff to identify and appoint into committees, commissions, and boards folks based on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Bilingual wayfinding signage, this is not in the budget, but we continue to look for grants. As for those we cannot implement, we simply don't know what those costs are at this time, nor do we have the staff capacity to determine what those costs are going to be within a 1 week period. Many of those projects are multi-year, long-term projects that will require the retention of consultants to determine the actual costs. It's not something we can do in-house. So what I can tell you is what we can go forward with based upon the grants that we have and the funding we have in place. There are so many other potential projects. We do not have those numbers, and we can't get those numbers within a week. It's simply impossible. And I think I'm done, unless.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question 6, the police department is currently advertising for a full-time sworn officer position. Is this currently vacant position part of the police department's proposed 23-24 salary benefits package, budget, salaries benefits budget? And the answer is yes. Question 7, how long has this full-time sworn officer position vacancy been unfilled? And the answer is the officer worked his last shift March 22nd, 2023. Question 8, how many full-time positions does this vacancy advertisement represent? Example, does the PD intend to keep the advertisement posted after hiring an applicant? Answer, currently it represents one person, the one that left March 22nd, 2023. But we do hope to identify a second officer to hire as well, because we have an announced retirement that is retiring this summer, our school resource officer, Officer Barlow. And that said, I will just say that right now is a fragile time in the history of your police department, between people leaving law enforcement, people retiring, and people leaving for higher paying jobs. Within 2 years, we have 6 main patrol officers that rotate shifts. The ones that you see in cars out taking calls. There are 6 of those. There should be 7, but we will be happy to have 6 back. Anyway, in 2 years, 5 of those people that are in the cars taking the calls will be new to right now. You will not see them on the road before, so. Sorry. That was
8,
8, that was question
I
8.
think, yes.
Question 9, this is yours.
This one.
If this full-time officer vacancy is part of the 23-24 salary benefit budget for the PD, what justification was used to not consider this as a vacancy that could be left unfilled in order to make up the general fund shortfall as described on page 6?
So I'm going to use this as another teaching opportunity. This is an operational decision. It's how we make the sausage, right? So every time you think about it, how you make the sausage is operational. That said, I think Bob answered part of it, and during my preliminary information, I also went in depth into how we determined what was going to be cut and what wasn't. So I think that was answered previously.
Question 10 was withdrawn. Question 11, Gerald, this is yours.
Yeah.
Within the Public Works Enterprise Funds, what is the definition of the contingency accounts? Is this a single account or separate and different? Is this a liability account or some other appropriation fund? What's the nature of the accrual in this account, and why do some of the transfers differ so drastically from year to year?
Okay, so contingency and reserves, which it doesn't say reserves, is an account or an item in the budget that is, for contingency, we look at 3 months worth of operating costs. And how I do that is I look at what personnel do I need, what's the minimum maintenance that I gotta do, and what is our debt for the year. And then I multiply that by 25% and I come up with a target. I need to be at or above that dollar amount for my contingency, because all the other contingencies run on the same thing. It's best practice to have that contingency in there. If I have over, that's even better. If we don't get the revenue in from rates, I can utilize some of that money later on in the year to cover the costs. If we have an unforeseen expenditure, a $30,000 lift station pump goes out and we didn't plan on replacing it, I can transfer that money into the fund to use it to buy a new pump, okay? The other ones is the transfers, and that is where you house the debt. That's where you house the franchise fee, because water, sewer, and stormwater by resolution is required to pay 7% of its revenues over to the general fund. Just like Pacific Power, just like Northwest Natural Gas, they have to pay a fee to the general fund. What was happening before was there was an additional transfer item in there that just was a lump sum number that was transferred over to the general fund. We stopped that and instead did direct allocations into the fund so that we could backtrack and show our calculations on how the funds were being charged versus this lump sum that just gets taken over to general fund with no information attached. okay? So that's the breakdown of transfers versus contingencies and reserves.
Also, here's question 12. How are the equities or overages of enterprise funds reinvested into their respective funds?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. We budget for a project, and the intent is to get that project moving forward. Sometimes we budget for the full project in the year, but we don't actually get the full project done. That money isn't spent, so our estimated fiscal year end is actually lower. I take that money, I roll it over into the next year, and then in that expenditure line item, I put the balance of that project into the next year. So that money doesn't get sucked away for a different project, and I have a project underway, and now I don't have any money to pay for it. So you'll see that beginning fund balance go up and down. You'll see those expenditure line items from the budgeted amount to the estimated year end change. And that's because, unfortunately for Public Works, the fiscal year begins in July 1 and ends in June 30. When do I construct stuff? In the summer. So the fiscal year ends right in the middle of my construction. I have to start my forecast in October the year before of where I think I'm going to be in construction by June 30. So that's why you see that change and me moving things around at the end so that I can keep projects moving in the next year.
So it's yours. Question 13. Does the city produce annual variance reports on which funds and expenditure line items went over their projected budget amounts? I would like to know which funds, directorates, and specific line items went over their adopted budget. If such reports do not exist, will the staff please produce such reports for the next budget committee meeting?
I always get these fun ones. This is, again, operations. Whenever you start talking about line items, you're talking about making the sausage and operations. So what happens is the staff review all of their funds. So Gerald reviews all of his funds, Bob reviews all of his funds, I review all of my funds. And if a reallocation or supplemental is required, it's then taken to the council for their approval. This is not within the budget committee's purview. This is a council determination.
All done?
All done. That one was short.
And then I have 3 questions from a second person that submitted questions. Question number 1. Can we please address the $8,337 DEQ fine that was just imposed on the city for discharging excess pollutants into the Willamette River? Kenna and Gerald, I know this is a problem you've inherited since neither of you were here in 2021, and I know that Gerald has undertaken some big projects to improve our wastewater treatment system, but I would appreciate a response on this, specifically how the issue will be remediated, and how this fine will be paid.
So the fine was paid out of the sewer fund. We wrote him a check.
Is this the fine that was under Key, under the previous Public Works Director?
So, well, let me back up here. I'll list all of the things,
Okay.
okay? So we got warning letters in 2014, 2015, 2016. We were issued a penalty in 2020. We did a mutual agreement and order, which I made sure that that was satisfied and cleared with DEQ in late 2021. And then we received this latest penalty in 2023. The violations for that penalty were violations that happened in February, March, May, and October and November of 2021, 2 years ago. And one violation listed in December of 2022, which was essentially a month and a half after I got here, and I was still trying to clean up my office. We will have these violations going forward. This is not uncommon. When your plant falls behind on needed upgrades and you haven't replaced your sewer lines and they're full of I&I, you have problems at your treatment plant that causes discharge violations. There was some other violations related to reporting. We've already addressed those. We wrote policies and our staff is actually, I made them write the policy. So they wrote their own policy to keep them from happening again, okay? So these will continue until we get the plant built and it's up and operational and it settles back down, because it's a lagoon and they get upset really easy. But I anticipate we'll have more of these, and DEQ understands that. They know that we're gonna be doing this upgrade, they know we're gonna have more penalties, but here's the thing. DEQ, their enforcement group, they don't have a choice as to go, you know, we're not gonna fine you this time. They're required to fine us. And we can either pay it or we can do a supplemental environmental project, which consumes a bunch of my time, and I have to get some outside folks to do some work for us, and then I pay them for that, and it offsets. In this case, I don't have time to do it. I wrote that to them in a letter, and I said, we're paying you this fine because I've got other projects to work on. I would prefer to use this money on the treatment plant, but I understand your role and you have to fine us. So I just paid it.
Does the DEQ come up with any funding to help us fix the problem, ever?
They're gonna give us a really big loan at
They
a
are?
low interest rate to do the treatment plant upgrade.
And these violations actually help us.
Yes, they do. When I fill out the application, they ask, have you had any violations? And if you haven't had any violations, you kind of go to the bottom of the pile of priority. But I can say, yeah, I had 3 years of warning letters, 2 years of penalties, 1 year of an MAO, and all of the other ones up until we do the project.
I think what's missing in that conversation and what you added to it is the community looks at that and sees willful violations, and clearly that's not the case.
No, it's the language that they write. I've fought with them on this in the past, that willful means, you know what, I'm just not gonna comply today. And that's not what our staff is doing. They're working with an antiquated plant that has very little control. So if there's more water coming in than they can process and clean and it goes out, they can't stop it. There's nothing they can do. And these improvements that we're doing, the headworks, the aeration, the cleaning out the biosolids, that I can't find any record, and the guys that have been here for over 20 years have never seen the lagoons cleaned out. Yes, they've never been cleaned out.
How is that not
I'm
neglectful then?
shocked.
Huh?
How is that not neglectful then? Like, I
If
mean, I
you
get
don't-
everybody's trying right now,
If
but
you,
how is that not neglectful for the last 20
if you
years?
don't have the money in the fund, you can't go do the biosolids removal. If the money's being removed from the fund, you can't do the
And
work.
nobody knew this but the budget director. Nobody knew that, the masking of the,
We weren't here.
you guys weren't here.
Yeah, the first.
A lot of people in this room were here.
Yeah, you want my answer? I'll give you my answer. The first, that this was brought to my attention was by Tom Pessimir, upon his departure, and he said, this is something you're gonna need to work on. This is what's been going on, and we had these budget committee meetings year after year, and many of you on council have been here with me. It wasn't obvious to us. It said overhead allocation, and there was money coming in. I didn't know what that meant, honestly. I had no idea. All the department heads just looked at each other like, what does, how is this?
Nobody knew what it meant, but they were all voting it and passing it, and
It was, we were told, as I believe this is what you'll all remember, was that, well, that's the money that those enterprise funds owe the city for the work that the city does for those enterprise funds. And there's just no basis for the number. The number was very arbitrary. It was what the general fund needed, what the number is.
You're not making the sausage?
That's a great answer.
I can tell you that since I've gotten here, I've been working really hard to get it cleaned up. And there's a lot more work to do, and more things will come, but I've got an energized crew and we're moving it forward.
I do want to say you're doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
I want to make that clear.
And all the more reason
I
why
don't
we
know
can't
why every
hold
time I go to
money
work for the city, I
arbitrarily.
get one that's like this and I gotta clean it up, but it's okay.
But you're good at it.
We'll get it cleaned up.
Okay, question 2. Are we expecting another significant shortfall next year? Specifically, are we expecting to see additional layoffs of valuable city employees?
Yes. Yes, we are. We're expecting another shortfall next year, and the year after, and the year after, and the year after that. Measure 5 and Measure 50 constrict us. And we can't take the funds from somewhere else. So unless one of the three revenue generating options are moved forward by the council, that's bond, levy, or fees, yeah, we're gonna have a shortfall. But I wanna note here that the city's debt ceiling pursuant to the Oregon Revised Statutes is 3% of real market value for general purpose property tax bonds issued by the city. That doesn't mean water, sewer, storm, special assessment. Those are our GO bonds, our general obligation bonds. The city's current GO debt, issued and outstanding, is 2.66% of the most current real market value. You'll find that on page 85 of the budget document. So bonds are not a recommended option. It leaves us with two, levies or fees. On your desk, you'll see this little informational sheet. Council members have seen this before. This came to you when we were talking about rates. The reason you have it in front of you is because if you look at that little orange part, and it's a big orange part for Corvallis, but if you look at the orange part, that orange part are general services fees. That relates to what we're talking about. So all of these cities, which are comparable to Independence, Albany, Silverton, Corvallis, Salem, and Dallas, have all already tried to balance their general fund through these fees that we're talking about. Only Monmouth and Independence haven't. And Monmouth and Independence are very different as far as budgeting and what they have coming in. So again, it's not just us, y'all. It's just, I wasn't here 3 years ago. I wasn't here 4 years ago. I wasn't here. Gerald wasn't here. We weren't here to see it and to start fixing it. But we're here now. And going forward, we want to fix it. We want to make it better. We want to figure out how to help this community move forward.
Do you have any insight, Ken, into what Monmouth is gonna do?
No, Monmouth is so very different. They for many, many years, continue to store money away, and they have good contingency and good reserves. They also have an electrical utility. We don't. So that's about all I know. Marty and I haven't talked.
They also passed levies to pay for their police department and their city hall, and we didn't. Right? This building was not built that way.
No.
Are you talking about the levy that just passed? That was for the police department and the city hall, or was it just city hall, the one that just passed?
The one that just passed with city hall.
But they
Their
previously
police
did
department is
PD
also
one.
still on a levy that we're still paying.
Okay.
So we don't have a levy and we don't have fees. If I'd been here 3 or 4 years ago, we could be talking about a levy now, right? But I wasn't. So, and you can't gear up for a levy in 10 months. It's impossible.
What is the turnaround time? Like, if you start talking about that now, how long until we actually start seeing more money coming into the city?
So levy's gonna take a while, and we're gonna have to do significant cuts if we go the levy route. If we go the fee route, that is via the council, and that can be put into place almost immediately. Of course, we'd wanna do public hearings and talk to our community and find out exactly what fees for what, right? But a levy, you're gonna have to, Mayor, you're good at this. A levy's a year and a half.
It takes a while, and then there's also, we have to work with the other governments.
Yeah.
Because we work in cooperation. The school district is probably gonna be considering some capital issues, and so they're.
Yeah, we're looking at a year and a half to 2 years probably.
And levies can fail.
And levies can fail. That is correct. And so, you know, we may be, and this is a question for the council once we get through budget. If we look at fees, you know, what are we looking at? And there will be work sessions on this. So anyone listening, anyone out there, come to the work sessions and give us your input, because we're gonna have to figure something out.
So a fee would help us get healthy in the coming years.
Correct.
It's not gonna do anything retroactive, but it's gonna get us healthy
Correct.
going forward.
But you know what, we're going forward, counselor. We're gonna fix it, we're gonna go forward, we're gonna be strong, we're gonna be healthy, we're gonna thrive.
Is there anything that we as individual citizens can do?
Yeah,
Because there's a lot of heat on you guys right now, but this is a community problem.
yeah, so there is a lot of heat on us. And we're taking a lot of heat for things we didn't do, right? And I think this is years. I didn't do this, guys, I've been here 10 months. I didn't do it, and I can't fix it in 10 months, it's possible. Yeah, you can support us, you can talk to your neighbors, let them know that the council's gonna have to look at fees and why, right? Do we want parks? Do we want libraries? Do we want police? Do we want these things? Because we're gonna have to pay for them. Other cities have already done that. So talk to people, explain to them about Measure 5 and Measure 50 so they understand. It's not that we're messing things up, it's just this is how much money we have and the inflation is this high. There's a gap, right? Yeah, for years we backfilled from Public Works, right? But you got stuff done and now we just gotta go forward the right way. So just educate people, and then if you have the time, friends of the museum, friends of the library, that would really help. The more money that they can put in, less money the general fund has to put in.
More money, more people.
More money, more people. My husband and I are both lawyers, and he used to say before he retired, it comes down to time and money. Anything else you guys that they could do to help that I missed?
Community support. It's not our library, it's not our museum, it's not our police force, it's yours. So you really have to get behind and support those groups, and work with the council to make it happen. Because the council's gonna need your support too.
Yeah.
This is gonna be very hard for the city council to go through. And so they need your backs, or they need you to have their backs.
And talk with our elected legislators at the state level about doing something to change the Measure 5 and 50 format. The big difference between us and the state of California, who also had limitations on property tax, is when a house sells in California, the value resets. It does not do that here. So we are only and ever under 5 and 50 going to get a 3% increase, which translates to a pittance of funds to the cities.
And I would suggest after we get through this budget drill, you made a very good point early on about teaching points. You made a point last week too about an onboarding program. I think those are two very important aspects here, but I think if Rob has time, if you have time after we get through all this, throw some slides up on the webpage, on the website. Throw some Measure 5 and 50 stuff, with the video that we saw last week up there. Those are really complex, situations to try to understand, and the average, heck, we don't really understand it. But those are really complex things. And I mean, I could tell somebody it's Measure 5 and 50, and they look at me like, well, just get rid of 5 and 50.
Right.
I mean, we have to change the Constitution to get rid of 5 and 50. That's not an easy thing to do.
Right.
It's virtually impossible, but.
We have one last question, right?
One last question. Is the gate still receiving any funds for being a warming shelter?
Yes, the gate is still receiving funds for being a warming shelter. And I do want to note that the trolley does stop there, and it is free. So anyone who may need to get to that warming shelter can do so. And in addition, our police department works closely with Polk County in regard to those in our community who may need the warming shelter. And they coordinate rides with Polk County. And then once contact is made with Polk County, the navigators with the county will work with the individuals to connect them to any and all services that are available to help them: clothing, food, housing, and assistance. That is that agreement was made in 2019, and it is in place. The council can consider, there are a bunch of hoops to jump through, a few hoops to jump through, and the council can consider terminating that at some point in time in the future.
How much money is that though?
$8,000 a year.
Yeah, that's not
I
much.
was told it was terminated.
No. I mean, unless there's something we didn't find, but the last information that we have is that it is in place. It went into place in 2019, and there has to be an action by the council to tell them that we're going to terminate it, and it's within a certain amount of time.
There was an end date in the contract. I thought the end date was 3 years.
No. The term of this agreement shall extend from 2019 to 2023. Thereafter, this agreement shall automatically renew. So it automatically renews annually for an additional 1-year term unless either party provides written notice of termination within 60 days prior to the next renewal date. So in the future, the council can, and we can absolutely bring it to the council
I'd
if
like
that's
that on
what
the next agenda.
Well, we can't do it then, but we can do it in, I think it's
Well,
February,
and
Councilor.
here's my issue, I know it's not gonna save, positions by pulling that money back, it's $8,000 a year, but we spent $24,000 so far. For, paying them to do a warming shelter, which they don't always do, and none of the other churches in our community get reimbursed to that degree. My understanding is Polk County gets a grant, and they use that money to pay for volunteers and supplies and services for the churches that will participate. I don't think it's fair that the gate gets $8,000 a year, and we don't really see an $8,000 benefit.
I'll bring it to the council at the time based upon the contract.
Thank you.
As long as the mayor would like to have that on the agenda, it's his agenda.
We'll work that out.
Absolutely.
That concludes the item 6.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the efforts and the questions that came in and the efforts for the answers that we received. I do have one quick side. No, I do not have one quick side question on it. Okay, on to number 7, continued review of the city budget discussions.
Did we finish, Chair, last time? All of the funds?
We did the department head overviews.
Okay,
And then we
Staff
close
reports,
the
and we opened and closed.
urban renewal.
Correct.
okay, so there's nothing further in the budget that the budget committee wants to go through?
I think they got to me at the end and they said,
Oh.
just keep going.
Okay,
I just had I tried really hard to look at the budget from last year. But one of the things that was missing on this budget was the, this is what we were expecting, this is what really happened for the last year. Can you tell me what the total budget is for this year? I think it's the $37,981,900 is the total budget. Is that right?
Page 12.
Total annual budget. And then last year's is $30,582,000, so we actually have an increase of like $7.4 million in our budget. And that's the part that was kind of confusing to me. And it could be just they're in different formats, so the numbers aren't right, but
So there's,
I mean, yeah, no, I'm not gonna be able to do that further. That's gonna have a lot to do all
yeah, probably it's gonna be.
so remember, when you look at that total annual budget, you're looking at public works and tourism and general fund. So that's why when in my budget message, I discussed that overall, right, our budget is stable. It's just the general fund that's not stable.
okay, so our budget's actually increased $7.4 million, which is great.
I don't know that for sure,
Okay.
but if it has, then it's Gerald.
That's public works, and that's,
It's Gerald.
that has to do with projects. And of those projects, some of them are based on getting loans.
Okay, so there's loan
And,
money that.
one of them in the sewer fund was we received a $2 million grant to do a brand new lift station and force main at the 9th Street pump station, which actually takes care of the full build out of 9th Street for the entire 20-year period. And 9th Street drains most of the south end of town.
And that $2 million grant was from Paul Evans and Deb Patterson,
Yes, and, what was it called?
Christmas tree.
Christmas tree. Here's a big present.
So I show last year's total uses as 33,810,227. Is that what you came up with, Counselor?
Well, the projected for 2022, 2023 was $30,582,400. I don't know what the actual was.
No, last year's budget, uses for last year, 33,810,227. I just pulled up last year's budget. That was adopted.
And I'm gonna make a note, I'm gonna have Nikki make a note for Rob that we add that to the next budget.
Yeah, well, I mean, looking at the budget from last year, there's so much more information. broken down and stuff, because I didn't see anything about the gate in the budget.
So that is, you'll
Like
find that,
Miscellaneous.
under administration, IGAs, I believe it is. So it's an actual agreement, it's an IGA, and so that's where you'll find it.
If you look on page 56, water fund, towards the bottom, total uses. Adopted budget for fiscal year 22-23 is 4.4 million. It goes up $1 million in the upcoming budget. There's 1 million.
Wait, what, page 56?
Page 56. And down at the bottom where it has total uses. And that first column is actual year 2021. Then the next, and it's like 2.4 million. The next one is 21-22, it's 2.6 million. 2023 adopted budget is 4.4 million. The proposed budget, the one on the far right, is 5.4 million, so there's 1 million higher, okay? If you go to page 58, the actual for the sewer operating fund, 2021 was 5 million. 21-22 it dropped because we finished some projects to 2.1 million. The budget for this year was 5.3 million. And next year it jumps up to 8.4 million. Part of that is we weren't able to get some of the projects going because of timing, because we had finished the master plan and the SDCs and the rates and get the rates in place before we could go, because some of them are loans and we have to show we have the rates to cover them. That's part of the answering the questions on the loan application. Storm drain, actual 2021 is 470,000. Next year it jumps up to 780,000. 22-23 it jumps up to 970,000, but you can see my estimated end is 670,000. The next one is 1.1 million. And part of that is the potential, we put money in there for potential fund from the Ash Creek Water District to help us do, potentially do detention and water quality improvements in the old section of town to help protect Ash Creek, because that's the fundamental reason why they're in place, is to protect Ash Creek. They have money, we haven't had a chance to talk, but it came in at the last minute, and so what I did is I put money in there. I think I put 200,000 in there, 200,000 in revenue and 200,000 in expenditures as an opportunity for both the groups to work together.
Okay, so we have it covered.
Yeah, so that's where you're seeing some of those changes in dollars. The big changes, I'm sorry, that's me.
Okay.
It's plants and
No, it's just,
facility
it's a completely
upgrades.
different format than what it was last year, so it was really hard to
Yes.
Yeah.
It
kind
is a
of
totally
look
different.
back and forth at the numbers.
So because the agreements are not broken down, right, like we couldn't see that the gate was still in there, what other agreements are there?
Oh,
So that agreement can be found, I mean, I'll just show you the line item so that we know what number we're talking about. On page 20, under materials and services, if you go to the third line, you'll see the donations and IGA program support for $13,600. That includes the 8,000. What else does it include? You know that off the top of your head? If not, I have the spreadsheet that might have a note.
Is that the 5K for the,
$5,600 is what we're looking for. Oh, there's $100 for the Les Schwab diaper
Oh,
drive.
$100 for the diaper drive.
So now you're $5,500.
Now I'm just saying, we're getting into operations here, y'all, just training opportunities.
This is what we go through.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
And so each of these line items, again, a training opportunity while Bob's looking, each of these line items could contain multiple things. And that's all part of the operations, right? As we go through everything we do, like the gate IGA, that went through council and the council approved it and then we dropped it into that line item. So almost every agreement would go through the council. I mean, there are some that are within my purview, they're operations and not council, but most of them go through the council and then are dropped into a pertinent line item. And so for those of you who haven't been watching what our council does, that's what they do. and you're welcome to watch and learn. And our mayor actually teaches other mayors and other councils on how to do a good job. So if you want to come watch, you can learn too.
I think
What you do.
a transparency note for Rob would be in a line item like that, maybe an asterisk and a footnote, just.
We did,
Yeah.
if we did that on everything, Counselor, you would have a
I know,
document
I
that
know,
is
but
so
just,
huge.
you're gonna get the question anyway, but,
Yep.
you know.
I would chew up at
understand.
least 300 pages.
Yeah, in your document,
You talk too much. anyway.
$5,500 to COG for something.
Council of Governments.
Yeah,
Oh, the membership fee
Maybe that's the membership fee.
could be.
Yeah, 13,000 is not very high, I asked my question before I
Right.
knew how much that was, so now
That's
it's
okay.
like small
It's
piece.
good exercise for us.
Yes, yes.
Good move.
Okay. All right, so we did get through everything, it's been, right?
Do we have,
Yeah, okay.
everybody has their questions answered?
well, I wanna talk a little bit about, and I heard your point about 2040 is not next week. It's a way down, yeah, please. It's a way down the road, but I just wanna make a few points and make sure I stay in my lane. You know, I'm trying to stay focused on foundational documents and policy and stuff like that, but I wanna bring up, and some of this is moot because we've already discussed it, but this is just some research that I did on 2040, but also some other foundational stuff. I think the piece that's missing from our conversation tonight is we are a multicultural community. Our staff doesn't reflect that. Our council doesn't reflect that. We know we have to fix that. We know that's an issue and we're working on it. You mentioned that early on. Appreciate that. The library, though, is one of the few places that truly addresses our multicultural community. And I think it's a very important point, that we don't lose sight of that in the fact, just because we're having to cut positions. We have to keep that focus. We have to keep that support to all parts of our community. There's been a lot of strides at the library lately to do that. You know, I'm very concerned, as I know many community members are, about bilingual story time going away. And I heard your point too, Kenna, about Friends of the Library. We need more people, we need more money in those nonprofits to help, you know, shore up the library and help the library do the work that it needs to do. So I just want to say to everybody, my concerns with the library cuts, I understand from a fiscal perspective why this has to happen. I understand that all the department heads had a say in what was going to happen, but we have a community and a segment of our community that's often overlooked and often takes a backseat to everything that we're doing. We all talk diversity, we all talk equity, but we really need to make that a cornerstone of what we do every day. It needs to be a part of everything that we do. And when we do make these cuts or propose cuts, I think we really have to think about who specifically in our community is affected by that cut. I understand, I hear everything you're saying, kind of, we really don't have any place to go. You know, we're kind of in a position that you inherited. It's disturbing to say the least, but the community has spoken that these are important things, maybe not essential. You know, maybe if they had to put it in terms of essential and non-essential, they would bump the library up higher. But I think it's really important that we take that into consideration, that this is, you know, I characterize libraries as kind of crossroads of civilization. You know, I mean, everybody from the social economic spectrum is in there. You know, every language is spoken in there. I mean, it's the place, it's the hub of our community, quite frankly. The museum's getting to that point. The museum's really working to become another hub of our community, and they're doing great work for diversity and equity kind of stuff. And, you know, I'm glad you aren't losing any staffing. You know, you are losing money, but, you know, we'll make that up with grants, I hope. We'll figure something out. But we need to have that same emphasis on the library.
So, Counselor, if I may, Chair, we intentionally left the bilingual staff on staff. So the library does have bilingual staff. That was intentionally done. When we worked with the library director, the three of us and the library director, we intentionally left someone on staff who's bilingual, knowing that we do serve that part of our community. Our public works is actually diversified as well. Our administration is. We have Emmanuel, we have Niley. Our police department, we have, we have 4 bilingual.
We have way more than 4 bilingual. We have at least 3 bicultural bilingual, but way more than.
And that's really great.
So
Those are not decision makers though. That's my point. That's great that we have some parity at the working level. But we as a council, we as a staff really need to move forward on making sure that we represent our community.
And then,
Councilor Roden?
Well, I was just gonna go on to this.
Counselor, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
It blows my mind that people are shocked that we're in this situation right now, because we knew this was going to happen. We knew this was gonna happen when we crammed all those buildings into the Riverfront Park, and it was former councils who put us in this situation.
I was not a
So
councilman then.
we knew this was happening. We debated this for a long time, that this point was gonna happen here. I agree that the library is not where cuts need to happen. The museum should not have cuts. But it is not on the back of our city manager and Gerald and our police department to have to weigh the burden of this, because it is not their fault that we're in this situation. It's prior councils, prior mayors, prior city managers who put us here. We knew we were gonna be here, and for anybody to say like, oh, we had no idea that Measure 5 and Measure 50 were gonna come and nail us in the tush now is completely oblivious to what we in the city, when we were running for these positions, knew this was gonna happen. We all knew this, and everybody looked at us and said we were crazy, because there's absolutely no way. And this is exactly where we're going to be. And the city should know that because we did, or the community should know that because we failed to have foresight, and we failed to fund and properly spend our money, that we're in this. And so we are all gonna have to buckle down and suffer the consequences of failed city management. This was going to happen. So I applaud you for your job that you're doing. It's impossibly difficult. It's not your fault that we're in this situation, and I'm so glad that you are the team to lead us out of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna?
Thank you, Counselor.
Did you have anything further?
No, I think we touched on the diversity within. Yeah.
Nathan?
Yeah, I want to echo, Don, what you said. I don't think it's the city staff that's at fault, if you will, for what's going on here. But to add to what you said, not wanting to see where certain cuts are coming out, that's what we as a committee are here to do. Decide and see if we can brainstorm and come up with a solution where we could potentially revise certain things on the budget here today, tonight, make that vote and do it in an open public hearing in a way that's responsible, in a way that respects what you're talking about with the library services. It's not a foregone conclusion. Budget cuts and decisions we make about budgets are not forces of nature. It's not something that's hitting us from like a tornado or something.
No, I agree, because I said this in 2 council meetings ago, that we are 2 or 3 years behind in reading in our community. And so to make cuts to our library right now when they're doing amazing things in our library is heartbreaking. But we do have the trolley, we do have overlapping services between Monmouth and Independence. And I hate to see the library cut, but I don't want to see parks closed, and I don't want to see, our police department cut. I mean, those are things that we cannot do. And if we have overlapping services between the Monmouth Library and our library, at least we have an option that the trolley gives us now.
I think there's creative ways that we can try and solve this problem tonight. I don't think there's ways that we can't just throw up our hands and say, well, the way the budget was given to us is written in stone, it can't be changed. We can't figure anything out, and we just kind of walk away.
I'm sorry if I implied anywhere that I was throwing up my hands.
I don't, I feel like.
That's never, ever my goal.
I don't want to make this forum be where we are given the budget and we're told by the staff what the limitations were, what their decision-making process, which was excellent. But then, if this committee is not comfortable with the budget, then according to Oregon law, we can make some revisions, additions, and deletions according to the committee rules, and then we just got to figure out what that is.
Has that ever been done before? I mean,
Ask
people that have
Nancy. I
been
guess
here for a
Nancy
long
probably-
time, do you guys change the budget
Yes, we
once you
have.
get it?
Yeah.
But who's the we?
Can you elaborate?
The committee.
The
Committee.
the
The
budget
voting-
committee,
The budget
yes,
committee
in the
makes
past
alterations.
has made, sometimes, and typically,
Yeah.
sort of minor changes. But understand that if you say no to a cut here, you have to find,
Yeah.
you have to cut something else.
I-
And so I think really what our staff has done has really taken a critical look. Because I remember sitting here many years ago and putting that lens on where, okay, we're looking at cutting, X FTE at, the library or the museum. Now, don't put names to those, even though everyone at that table knew exactly who we meant. And they're our friends and they're our neighbors, and that makes this incredibly difficult. And then you get to the management level and it makes it even more so. Because I may go, oh yeah, it's that wonderful lady at the library, she's always so sweet. These folks work with these folks every day. They're talking about cutting coworkers. And so you really do, you have to do your best to take it down, that critical viewpoint, okay, that, everybody with conflict said they could do this in an unbiased fashion. Those aren't people, they're FTE. And I know that sounds like a horrific lack of compassion. I don't mean it to come across that way, but literally we are here for dollars and cents.
Exactly, yeah.
Appropriate fiscal stewardship. So if you have suggestions of where else to find that money, I
Yeah.
say, go.
Well, I do have some thoughts. I'd like to start the conversation with the transfers either before or after enterprise funds hit the contingency accounts. We saw the way that the budget went from last year to this year, where a lot of those transfers from the overhead allocations, that word we've been talking about, went from hundreds of thousands of dollars down to zero. Overnight, like from one year to the next. That's what happened. For good justifiable reasons. However, that action in and of itself is the direct cause of why we're seeing some of the deficiencies in the services. So I have not yet seen or heard anything in law or statutory, verbiage that says doing a movement of that kind is absolutely illegal or unlawful or should never be done, or it's absolutely bad practice. I would argue that what happened in the years previous was bad practice because it was trying to paper over a pretty large deficiency, right? That was not being transparent. It was not being honest. It was being quite, for lack of a better word, devious.
Nathan, do you have a specific recommendation?
Yeah, I think we should look
Okay.
at those transfers again. We went
So
from
robbing Peter to pay Paul.
not robbing and Peter to pay Paul. We're talking about reinstating critical services to the community, as Shannon already pointed out. Right? That what's happening at the library or any other department that's having critical services being cut to the community, that everybody here is talking in public, the community will be able to see us discussing it, right? So if those funds, which we at first wanted to make sure that we were being transparent, fiscally responsible, good stewards of the funds, in so doing that, we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. We've said, okay, we want to be fiscally responsible, but at the same time, what's happened is now our library's lost some critical services. So,
And which infrastructure project do we not,
we're not talking
do we not
about,
do?
we're not talking.
Well, but
about
we
that.
are, if we take money from Public Works,
We're
that's
talking
exactly
about-
what we're talking.
Are you talking about the contingency
Yes,
funds?
yeah.
And you're talking about, for instance, taking 10 or 15% of every contingency fund and
It's-
pushing it
well,
towards refunding?
I think we need to first talk about what dollar amount we're actually discussing. How much is the dollar amount that could potentially reinstate some of these services for the library or any other department that we feel is necessary for the community? I don't have a dollar amount. Does anybody else here have a dollar amount? What are we talking about? We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, $20,000? I don't even know. That would be a question.
Well, where it's gonna come from?
No, we're just talking about for the library at this point.
I just don't think it's that easy.
I'm I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. If you take money from the utility funds to cover that gap, which is a prior practice, one of two things is gonna happen. I'm either gonna cut projects, which potentially could land us in more hot water with state agencies, or I'm gonna be going back to the city council for a rate increase higher than what we were able to keep it down to for sewer, for water, and stormwater. So,
What's the dollar?
And let's not forget, we could not get funding because of this action that had been taken. We were told we couldn't get funding for infrastructure projects.
USDA refused to fund us for the lift station projects. We had to get funding through DEQ. We could have got a better interest rate through USDA, even longer term loans with USDA. They refused to fund us because of the transfers.
And the amounts that you were dealing with.
There's no justification
When did
for
you
it.
find that out? I've never heard that.
I hadn't either.
I found that out from the prior finance director, and it happened way before I got here. It would have happened back in the 2016, 15, 16 is
Okay.
when the first loans were secured. And that was Riverview Pump Station, 9th Street Pump Station, the effluent pump station, and the recycled water use facility.
So the transfers actually cost us money.
You are correct.
Yes,
They cost us opportunities and money.
and that's what we're trying to correct, because I have a $10 million upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant in total. And your water treatment plant, just the water treatment plant alone, with this last year's inflation, is 20 million. Then I add in the reservoir, the piping, the intake system, the raw water. I'm in the 30 plus range. And I've got to get loans for that, and I've got to try to get you the cheapest loans possible. But if money is being taken from those funds without the justification that we've set up, the low interest folks like USDA, they will walk away.
And by 2034, our experts are telling us our wells will fail. You will not have enough water.
Can't keep up.
We have to get that water treatment plant done.
And I have a water right that I have to get the plant under construction in some way, shape, or form by 2026, so that I can ask for an extension for that surface water right. Otherwise, the money that you spent to purchase that surface water right will be gone.
So I don't expect you to have this number in your head, but when you have a quiet afternoon, would you figure out what we could have saved if you've gotten a USDA loan?
Is that even, I don't know. I don't even know if we have that data.
USDA loan's probably gonna run in the area of 1.5%.
Okay, so
And
what's the
depending on
interest
how many years
variance?
you run it out, and I think our DEQ, don't quote me on this, but our DEQ is 2.5 to 3.5%. So run that out over 20 years.
Okay.
And right now, the pump stations, I've been able to hold off borrowing any money. I've been paying cash for the rest of it. We're at 7.25 million in debt that we haven't started paying on yet.
And that is different than the almost 3% general obligation bond debt that I told you about.
Yeah.
And Gerald, it's safe to say that even if we argue about these essentially nickel and dimes for this budget, we have looming debt coming up that's going to be devastating if we do not curb this. So I don't think there's any contingencies that we can, borrow from now to fix this if we don't address the big problem by stopping these transfers.
I'm not saying that you can't. I'm giving you my professional recommendation not to.
And is that because
this is your,
And that's because we have failed to have the proper infrastructure we need for this community. We have failed that. And so now we are, running like crazy trying to
I don't
fix
disagree with
this.
that at all. I'm 100% on board with that.
I think we're all on the same
Infrastructure is
page.
very important.
But
I just have to ask, are you telling me that the enterprise transfer amounts need to be $0?
no, they're not
They're
zero.
not zero.
I'm saying,
Look at page.
So,
right,
I think.
but
I
the
think
line item that I'm talking about,
the
right?
line item that you were talking about was that lump sum transfer, that was zeroed out.
Right.
What ended up happening is general fund is direct billing the rest of the fund. So if you look at personnel service costs and other costs, it's directly, so those numbers went up a justified amount and that unjustified dollar went away. That justified amount plus the 7% of my revenue is going to pay for general fund services that provide service to the water fund, the sewer fund, the stormwater fund.
And those allocations are on page 92. The
Yes.
personnel allocations are on page 92.
So we took away that squishy, no justified numbers, I can't find a spreadsheet. We created a spreadsheet, we took that number out and we built back in the cost. So they're not coming out of the general fund, they're coming out of the utility funds.
But that line item doesn't have to be zero.
The line item has to be zero because you're already charging me in the other funds, the other line items in my fund.
Because they're directly allocated. So IT is a really good example. Jason, would you please pull your IT and explain what we did to you?
Yeah, so previously, with IT, especially with software, that would all run through the IT department. And so there's just kind of this big blob of money that pays for all the software. In order to actually be more transparent and show who's using what and, you know, how much we're spending, we took a look at every single piece of software that we owned and determined how it was licensed, whether it was per machine or per user, and then looked at how every single department was using that and what their fair share of the stuff that I provide they need to be billed for. So for example, if Gerald has 8 guys, then he's gonna pay for 8 licenses of Office, he's gonna pay for 8 copies of antivirus, et cetera, as opposed to just, well, the IT department needs 30 grand, so Gerald, I need 30 grand.
Yeah, and if you look at page 55,
and we did add a new GL code for software, so you can actually see how.
I'm gonna get into the line item weed to try to explain this. If you look at the materials and services and go down almost to the bottom to line 63900, contract services IS. You'll see it's zero in prior years, but there's a $7,800 cost in there. That's the cost for my staff to use software. That's the software licensing and the rest of it. And if you go up into the salary area, prior years, Jason was getting paid from the general fund by that money that was just sucked over there. Now Jason is getting paid directly out of my water fund, my sewer fund, my stormwater fund, my street fund, his proportionate share of cost for doing business with these other funds. So that money that got zeroed out, it didn't really get zeroed out. It actually got charged into other areas, but with a defensible allocation.
Which was
Trackable.
not $2.6 million.
Right.
I agree with Councilor Roden that this is not your fault. We understand that, we recognize that this is all inherited, but every single member of this council at some point in time or another has questioned interfund transfers. And we always got, it's accepted, it's the way of doing business, and I don't want to drag people's names through the mud, and certainly not the rank and file who work in the finance department that do a great job, but
They do a great job.
But this sucks, Kenna. This totally sucks that we went down this road for so long and didn't do anything about it. And to Dawn's point, we don't know this. We are not finance people. And, you know, I feel like, and anybody can disagree with me, but I feel like we did our due diligence.
You did.
We asked the right questions, we got answers to those questions, and we never had a conversation about best practices, quite frankly. And I think the wheels started to come off a little bit when Chief was acting city manager, because we started to see there was some stuff that maybe we all didn't understand. But I don't think that we saw the tidal wave coming.
And to that point also, as a council, we depend on what we assume, have been told, have hired to be professional understanding and professional behavior. Now, I can look back, and I have looked back before, and I've been disappointed by some of the quality and some of the actions and some of the decisions that were made at a staff level. However, we do have to, as a citizen body, be able to at least hope that we can be able to say, these people that we hired are professionals, they're supposed to know what they're doing, we have to have a certain level of trust. What you said about the transfer of funds, every year I questioned, because we get 3 pages of inter-fund transfers, inter-fund loans, and balances, and this is gonna be paid off by the end of next year, and then we get to the end of next year, and there's a whole bunch of new ones. No one could justifiably explain that other than to say, this is the way that small cities have to do business.
Okay, by nature, go ahead. Best practices change. Historically, that could be correct. Moving forward, when you hired me, I told you I will always do the right thing. It may be the hard thing, but I will give you the best options I can. Moving forward, we will get a finance director who is very, very qualified. We need that. We need that to move forward. We will have a public works director that knows what the heck he's doing, right? I will always help you to make the hard decisions. I will always give you the information. I told you that in my interview, and I promised that to you. Bob started it. Sorry, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Well, and,
Go ahead.
Okay, so Nathan, I have struggled with this. You know, my budget is 100%, well, 98% this year because we took some money from the Economic Development Fund for work that we do in park events, right? But it completely relies on this. And last year, the $703,000 that we still took in an overhead allocation, we could kind of, straight face say it was okay because we hadn't completed looking at where all of the areas were that we would have to figure out the actual dollar amounts for, right? So now we have done that. We've looked at all the places where we can say this is absolutely an enterprise fund expense, so enterprise fund is paying for it. Now that that's done, I don't know how with any kind of ethical decision-making, I can support the idea of taking $20 that's supposed to go for water or sewer or streets, well, not streets, stormwater, and take part of that and do something else with it that isn't what it was intended to go for as a rate from a ratepayer, right? I can't see doing it, and it's my department more than anyone's, so.
One thing that was mentioned at our last meeting that I'd sure like to see in the budget, we need some cameras that can get those speeders and send out automatic tickets.
I agree. Nathan, also to your point, as another community member on this committee, I think that the way that you describe the situation that the library offers critical services, I do believe that they are valuable services, but in comparison to what needs to be done with our utilities as our population continues to grow, we have to get that under control. In my opinion, that is critical. The library, absolutely valuable, but did I hear correctly that the actual, it ends up being about 1 FTE that we're cutting?
Approximately.
Compared to the massive work that needs to happen in water and sewer?
Well, I guess that's my point, right? We're talking about, still haven't heard a dollar amount on how much we would actually need to find in this problem-solving session here that could restore those library services. I still don't know a dollar.
But why that 1 FTE and not all the other things?
I'm not
that have
talking
been
about
cut?
the FTEs, I'm talking about the services. Whether or not, it's essentially, it's up to we haven't heard from the library director about how much that would potentially need to be.
But we did hear from Kenna that we had a budget deficit of
we started out at 1.2 million.
$1.2 million, and they have whittled it down to 300,000, then they found an error, down to 100,000. So we're 100,000 short.
We're actually 100,000, we have 100,000 extra.
Okay.
We're 100,000 in the black.
Okay, so,
Which is great.
that is so small.
Yes.
In a huge budget like this, to try to think of how we can nickel and dime it into saving all these services. And I know this is not popular, but it's hard to be a citizen in Independence right now. I mean, it's hard to be a citizen anywhere, and money is just so tight, and people are struggling, and we're just gonna have to tighten our belts. And that's just the reality of it, and it's really unfortunate. And I view things from my perspective, and I really try to step out and look at other people's perspectives, I really do. But as a single mom, I can barely afford to feed my kids, and then you guys are talking about raising fees, and I'm just like, what in the world is going on? And I pay taxes on my property more than probably anybody sitting around here because the year mine was built. It just happens to be that way. So it's like, you're gonna raise fees even more. And so I don't like cutting services either, and I hate cutting the library because it's so important. But I feel like we need to be transparent with our community, tell them what's going on, this is why it's happening, and this is why we have to change going forward, because we can't throw up 300 units beside the river again.
I don't think you
To
can
save us.
discount the fees, the rate fees, because if we don't do something, we're gonna be in the same situation every single year.
Well, and I
What else
agree.
can we cut, you know?
I mean, we're gonna have to do something grander than this. I'm just saying, I'm not sure at this moment we can look at the budget and try to figure out how we can get that one, the services back.
I'll clarify, Patrick clarified, it's 1.4. So 1.4.
1.4
Yeah,
FTE
total. 3 part-time, 1.4.
But we're talking about, as a budget committee, budget line items. So
Well-
what's the amount? What does that transfer into?
That was.
How many dollars?
To restore the service?
Yeah.
That would be a better question.
Yeah, I have no idea. Because of the way we did it. Like I said, we started at 1.2 million, we dropped it down to 700,000. Each department cut what they could cut.
Totally understand. So,
To get those positions back, I ballpark, because I don't have the giant spreadsheet
Yeah.
in front of me with benefits and everything, we were looking at about 130.
130,000.
So we put
Which
ourselves
is
back
more
in the
than we
red if
have.
we did it. We put ourselves back in the red.
Maybe 110, but yeah, I can look for sure.
And
find
that
out,
leaves us no extra money for problems. And problems arise every single year.
And I meant to applaud Patrick and what you're doing with the backpacks and the reading and the listening material. I think that's great. Maybe we can go to Central High School and say, hey, there's some credits we can give students for working in the library over the summer. Let's get them reading to younger kids. Let's get them in the schools. And I know Patrick works miracles on getting things done at the library, but maybe we can look at those types of things too, because we have a problem with idle hands with kids. Let's get the high schoolers into our libraries and help our youngers.
We need people to join the Friends of the Library.
Yes, we do.
That is a fundraising arm of the library, and it is not raising funds right now, or at least not in any kind of realistic amount. We need people in the Museum Society. That's also a nonprofit that supports the museum. The people who are on those two boards are wonderful people, and they're doing great work, but we need some energy on those boards. We need folks to come to those boards and say, how can we augment the program? What do you need, fiscally to augment programs? We need energy on those boards.
And if you go back, I know it's a number of years ago, but if you go back just a little over 20 years, since the library is 20 years old this year, there was a citizens task force that was appointed by the mayor, by the council, and their task was to raise funds to facilitate building a new library. And it was a stated goal, and the committee worked darn hard in order to make that happen, and it was successful. Being on a nonprofit group that just sustains and raises a little money and meets every month and so on, it's great, and people volunteer, but it's not the same as having that big goal out there in front of you to say, we need to raise X much money and we have this much time to do it and let's activate this organization.
Yeah, I think it's time for a task force, Mayor.
Mayor?
I think it's time.
Chair, if I may,
Real quick,
really quick. I also want you all to know that Sean's department handles grants, and he is working with the library department to look at every possible grant for services, for whatever is needed, to help out. And he started doing that as soon as we started talking about this.
And that's great, and you've been amazingly, successful in that area. But that's not really your job to hold up the museum, we've gotta get these boards what they're really meant to do.
okay, so we are going to move forward to item 8, and basically we kind of drifted right into item 8. So I would like to open for public hearings, state revenue sharing. Seeing and hearing no.
Was there anyone that wanted to comment on that?
On state revenue sharing from the public?
Anybody objected to state giving us money? Okay, this is why I wanted to define that.
Okay. So now I'd like to open for public discussion, public comment on the proposed budget fiscal year 2023 ending 2024. And I ask that we limit our commenting time to 2 minutes. And you can step up to the podium if you would like.
Are we gonna, we're not calling names, we're just gonna open?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mitch Bradley?
Somebody has my name.
Are you Mitch?
I am.
Okay, Mitch, go ahead.
All right. I feel more comfortable here. Is that okay? It seems like people can see me. I am biased. Okay? Okay. And these are my personal views. Very clearly. I'm aware, much more aware at this moment, that I don't understand the budget. I don't know the ins and outs of it. All I can do is tell you my reaction to, and the library is my concern. I may have it figured wrong, but several of us sat down and added up numbers, and as the numbers we came out with, almost half the staff was being sacrificed. If you add up all the numbers, 2 hours here, 10 hours here, blah, 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 that's a lot. That's a lot for one group to sustain. I know that Patrick has wrestled this up and down, but we're just sick, we're just shocked, those of us that are involved with the library. And these people work incredibly hard to educate our community. And this is, as somebody else mentioned, especially the citizens of color, the citizens who are poor. At one point, after a divorce from a lawyer, I ended up on $1,000 a month with 2 high school kids. You know how far that went? I wasn't out buying books. Books cost $25 or more a pop. I went to the library. Many people who can't afford other ways of getting their kids to read and getting their kids involved in storytelling, etc., which will transfer to higher scores at your schools, which I keep hearing you don't want. You do want. You don't want what you have. Well, if you don't like what you have, then start with the young children. Start with the bilingual storytelling that they do at the library. You're cutting an essential service for this community. And not a nice thing. It's not a nice thing. This is an essential service. And again, it's especially essential to those people who can't afford more. And they're not gonna come here and complain because they don't have the education, they don't have the self-confidence. You said you were a single mom. I bet you're the
Chair,
only
that's
one.
2 minutes. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you, Mitch.
Um,
Mitch, that's 2 minutes. I'm gonna
That,
have-
then I will disclose by saying I really hope you can find another way. I assume you will have to do something with the library.
Thank you.
But half the staff, good God. Thank you.
Would you like her to leave your written notes with?
If you would care to, yes, with a minute.
Mitch,
I'm sorry.
would you be interested, if you'd like, you can leave your written notes so they're submitted.
You wouldn't want to try to read it.
Oh, okay. We wanted to offer the opportunity.
I have revised this,
Okay.
all, you don't want to read this.
We trust you.
Thank you.
Shelby Platt?
Hi, I volunteer at the library. It's a wonderful way to get to know people in the community. I enjoy it very much. There are a lot of volunteers at the library. That's how things get done. It's not the librarians. It's not just the library. There are a lot of volunteers. As a matter of fact, I belong to a book group led by one of the librarians who is going to be let go. So now we don't have a book group. We also, the same person that's full-time, 3/4 time, being let go, has worked hard in the community to get our library involved with OHSU for a 2-year program that is going to encourage rural people to walk every day, every week. And she worked hard to do that, and she'll be gone. There will be another person to lead that, of the 18 of us. It's a lot, 18 people for one person. I'm really sad, And I'm really sad that the library won't be open on Saturday. I hope more people will volunteer because they're gonna need it.
Patrick, how many volunteers does the library have right now?
I don't have this year's total.
I know that in past year, the number was about 150.
We're not there.
Not there,
We slowly came out of COVID, and conservative estimate,
So,
we
in other
have,
words, you have plenty of opportunities for volunteers.
conservative estimate, we have about 20
That's 2
active
minutes,
right
Chair.
now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Some of them have to do it for high school. I'm going.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that would like to speak? 2 minutes, please, and your name?
Hi, my name is Brianna Prado, and I'm a senior at Central High School. This is my first ever city council meeting. I've never actually been to one, so it's nice to see all of you. I'm here because I heard that Ramon Martinez is one of the people that is being cut off the staff, and I just want to advocate for him and explain to all of you how great of a resource he is, especially for the Latin community. The Latin community is aware and knows about all of the events that are going on because of Ramon. He is a super important resource to all of us, especially to farm workers, single mothers, agricultural, everybody. He's such an important resource, and he has a great connection and relationship with everyone. And I think that without him being there, we're losing part of our perspective, our word, and just any knowledge that we have in the community. And I'm just here to advocate for him, and also for the library, because the library is such an important feature and place for our community, for the Latinos in our community as well. I grew up with a single mother, and I didn't have access to books and stuff because she couldn't really make ends meet. So the library was the way that I was able to learn English, learn a different language from the one that I originally know. And I think I would thank the library today for being able to go to college next year. Because if I weren't able to develop my literacy, if I didn't attend bilingual story time, I don't think I would have been able to graduate high school or been able to pursue higher education. So I'm just here to make those.
That's 2 minutes, Chair.
Those statements and
Thank you.
for you guys
Your
to-
statements are very impactful. Thank you. Do we have anybody else wishing to speak?
Me.
Okay.
Sorry, for me, my name is Luz Prado, and I just want to come to represent the community Latino here. So the people works in the field, the people cleans your house, the people who pick up your food wherever you have it on your table. So I know the persons are here, everybody go to the university. And then you have your degree, and think about the people who work outside with the hard work. And they don't have the opportunity to go to the school, but they have the opportunity to work for bring the future for her sons, for her daughters, and for her kids, to get this position, to get the same rights where you have now. Because we are immigrants, we came from the other country to get the future, to get the better things for our family. And then so now we have the opportunity to give a daughter, go to the university. Don't stay here what the world are doing. Don't do tacos like me. Go to the university. And then it's the same. My community, go to the field, see what happened, and then so see what is important to keep especially the Ramon position, because he connect the community with the resources, with the scholarships, with everything, not just Ramon is nice, Ramon is like, all the time is happy. No, think about more than he works, not just in the desk, he works outside. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we need more people like him.
We need more people. You and your family helped save the 4th of July parade a few years ago. And I thank you for that, but I thank you for coming here and speaking about this too, because you are amazing what you do for our community, and I just really appreciate you. Thank you.
Mayor, do we have any openings coming up in the near future for the budget committee?
Each year, we check in to see who wants to continue, who doesn't, and so next winter or so, there'll be, I think Jared's gonna have an opening, and so I think there'll be some, and then we'll make appointments.
Okay. Liz, you don't need a degree to be on this committee. I'm a community member. It's not required, so they have there's a certain number of people from the community, but I would love to see some of our migrant families represented. We can make an effort
There's
to
a
do that.
council election in less than 2 years. Usually on the dot.
Careful what you signed up for when you showed up.
Do we have any other public comment? Okay, thank you very much, and honestly, thank you, all of you very much. I'm putting it back on. All right. We are on to item number 9, action item. And again, as Kenna mentioned, we have options. We can recess tonight and come back again. I believe the next one is May 31st.
Madam Chair? Is it I have a question that I am burning to ask Patrick. Would this be an appropriate time to do that?
Go ahead.
Okay. So Patrick, I'm wondering, because I'm going to say, I trust me, I've been doing this, I think this is my 12th or 13th year. And I get cuts. I question Saturday. I'm thinking, I mean, that is likely the day, I mean, back when I was parenting little ones, I mean, Saturday, that was the day that, I mean, we needed to fill that as a mom working full-time with young kids, that was the day that we went to the Gilbert House, that we went to the library. And I guess, I imagine that is probably one of your most popular days.
Absolutely.
So I guess I'm questioning the logic of closing.
Why not Wednesday?
Yeah, how about we close Monday and Tuesday or?
Okay, so counselors, I did speak with Patrick briefly, and one reason that we can't close midweek is because then staff is not getting 2 days off. I mean, we all appreciate a 2-day weekend, like a Sunday or a Monday, or Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday. And another reason is, with Monmouth being closed on Mondays, that is our highest trafficked day at the library. Closing Saturdays it hurts my heart. It hurts all of our hearts. So I guess Patrick could go.
Yeah,
more
no,
on that.
I would love to, so thank you, good question, because there was a lot of conversation about knowing that we can't open doors when we don't have staff, and we're limited by budget, how many staff, and so, I took a deep dive, we have door counters at both the front and back doors, so I looked at when we were most heavily trafficked, and I assume that it is because Monmouth is closed, but Mondays and Saturdays are about even as far as our busiest days. And so looking at, again, availability to the public of going to Monmouth on Saturdays was one thing, but also, for lack of a better word, it needs to hurt. If the library is going to close, people need to know that it's going to close, or else nothing else is going to change. I want this to hurt the shortest amount of time as possible, but it's going to hurt my staff. Losing their coworkers, it's going to hurt my staff trying to pick up the balls that are dropped by the people that are performing other tasks. And so if I can support them by having their hurt be the shortest amount of time possible, this was a way, for two reasons. This is a way that, first of all, being closed on Saturday, it'll be noticed 100%. But also, being closed on Monday upsets two communities, one of which has nothing to do with our funding situation.
Right, okay. I mean, yes, I understand, it needs to hurt, but to the point that you just made, this is not the fault of moms of preschoolers.
Right. It is not.
But it's a completely solvable problem in this committee right here, right now. This is not an unsolvable problem. It's not a force of nature. This wasn't foisted on us without any choice. We are the committee that can make votes and make.
And that's why I'm asking the question.
But the thing that, what we're weighing now is do we close a park to keep the library open?
And my argument back to that is, we don't have to do either one. We're hiding behind financial best practice laws, and we're going to sacrifice the library so that we can continue to, so that we can feel good financially.
But if we don't.
That we're not doing what we used to.
Just so I can make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. If we don't obey the best practices now, how are we setting ourselves up for the future so that we can correct this situation we're in?
I hear you. That's a very good question.
And so that we can procure financing in the future.
Right,
I
exactly.
mean, we've lost the USDA super low interest.
So maybe we don't have to go back to the way we used to do it that kind of screwed ourselves over. What if we came up with another plan, through the contingency fund? We haven't even talked about that plan. I think we're just getting to the point now where we're just like, it's been 2.5 hours. There's been a lot of saying we can't do this, we can't do that.
Don't assume that I honestly feel that all of us are here ready to fight. I mean, we're all ready to battle for what's right for the city. So I don't think it's fair for you to say that any of us are tired and ready to go home, because I can be here for days.
I totally agree with you.
Let's keep this up. But the thing is, and this is just, you have a contingency fund for a reason. So if we start taking away the contingency fund, when something hits the fan, we don't have anything to fall back on. And as a mom, I need something to fall back on. And as a community, we need something to fall back on. And I don't like this either. You know, I'm thinking, we close Pioneer Park. You know, I'm like the first park in Independence, if that can save the library. You know, I am trying to think of the same things too, but we can't take from contingencies to save this. I don't see how. I mean,
Well, when you say you can't, what do you mean? Why can't?
because we need contingencies.
Well, we're talking about like maybe $100,000 out of 1.5 million. It's an extremely low percentage.
And how many years are we gonna do that?
I don't know. But we're here right now, right? We're here now, and we've had public comments. In the last 3 years, I haven't seen any public comments, and we just had 6 of them. This is a decision. If we decide to do this tonight, it's gonna be on us.
But to what end though? Like, right, do we restore the 1.5 FTE for the library, but then not the community liaison position?
No, that's up for discussion between us, but I haven't seen anybody wanting to do that.
The
Discussion.
contingency is set by resolution, you do not have the power to change that. The council does, you do not, this budget committee does not.
So that if we approve the budget committee, or we approve the budget tonight, what I'm hearing, which I haven't seen the verbiage on that, but the council then could potentially, during the adoption of the budget, use a contingency after it's adopted.
Is that correct, Hannah?
I apologize, Chief and I were discussing something.
So what I'm hearing, what you just said, and I haven't seen the verbiage, so I don't know, I'd go through the budget manual. But we could approve the budget tonight, but then it doesn't get to the point where a contingency can be initiated or taken out of that fund or whatever, until the city council or the governing body adopts the budget. And at that point, the contingency could be exercised.
It is the council's decision, that is correct, because their resolution is their determination. What I will tell you, best practices is 20% or more. We are at 16. We did not move you to 20% because we don't have the money. So you are below best practices as we say. I asked that question right away. I immediately went to contingency and said, can we reduce this? You are already below best practices. If we have a problem,
When we have a problem.
For perspective, can you tell us what problems are we talking about? Like, what are the potential things that could come up?
Like
Just
if
so
our-
we understand the gravity of how important that contingency
Like
fund
when our
is.
community froze a few years ago, right? That was a huge expense on our community that we were not able to.
Gerald mentioned a $30,000 pump failure that they were not.
those are public
Those are public works.
Has anybody heard of
Utility funds.
ransomware in the newspaper?
Right.
There, thank you, Jason.
The failure of the roof at City Hall and having to replace the roof. HVAC going out, losing this generator burning up and we have to buy a brand new one, which the generator for 9th Street Pump Station, it's taking me 2 years to get that generator.
What happens if
Or
a
we
pump
get
station goes out,
sued,
Gerald?
something
If a
happens.
pump station goes out,
What's the impact on the community?
sewer
Lift station.
overflows, DEQ violations, and a whole lot of cleanup and mitigation.
Or
So,
we get sued, something happens in our police department and we get sued.
If we don't exercise the contingency, what happens to that money?
It stays in there and it rolls for the next year.
Okay, so it's just gonna be a forever contingency
We
fund.
just hold it
Okay.
forever, yeah.
But we'll add to it next year to bring it up to 20 or keep it at 16 if we use it?
That's a council decision to discuss at a later time.
Okay.
On the grant writing, there's a good chance we could get a grant for the library, because the library is one of those services that is grant worthy.
Usually not for
Yeah.
staff, but
Not for
we
staff,
are
but-
looking for staffing grants particularly, but usually.
Really, there's
They're
staffing
usually-
grants?
Sure, well, so I would say, the type of stuff we're looking at tends to be project or program, so it is a staff person, but it's a person to teach a specific class or do a specific thing, not necessarily to do sort of general library duties.
So we can get creative and really
Yeah.
be looking for that grant with our grant writer.
Yeah, and so, for example, we're looking at workforce development grants because the library can offer
Are you
training
doing,
programs.
are you doing the same thing for community engagement? I mean, I know that I'm not gonna talk to you like you're not here, like Emmanuel's gonna pick up a lot of those things, but are you also doing that to maybe flush out that position a bit more?
I'm gonna try, but that's honestly gonna be a harder one, just because it's a little more of a nebulous, I can say, we can write a grant to have a library person teach, basic computer skills and maintaining routers and things like that. Writing a grant to have somebody, sort of engage with the Latino community, it tends to be, you need a little more specifics
Maybe
around that.
something
so-
related to migrant support.
Well, yeah, exactly, and I think
something like that.
there's opportunities, it's just a question of figuring out exactly what makes
Because,
the most sense.
whereas Emmanuel has skills, he also has a full-time job, and I know he's gonna do his absolute best to fill the gaps, but,
It will not be a full coverage.
Right,
It will
but if
be
there's
portions.
But if there's anything we can do to help support our migrant community.
I'm gonna direct us back to the agenda. Item 9 is an action item. There are options available, as I said, a third meeting has been designated if needed as May 31st at 6:30 PM. As chair, I cannot make a motion, so I need to entertain a motion from someone if you want to move forward with these actions. Do you want to recess? Do you want to move towards the motions on approval?
Our decisions aren't gonna get any easier.
Well, I'll go ahead and do it. I move to approve the City of Independence budget fiscal year 2023, 2024.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Nancy Lodge, second by Councilor Morton. Is that any discussion?
I'd like to amend the motion a little bit if I can, based on the fact that we're going to rely on Sean's department to do his due diligence and try to find some way to fill these gaps as best we can. Understanding that that's not your priority clearly in your job, but whatever you and Marshall can do to help fill those gaps, I think it's really important that we capture that.
Is there a way, is it possible, now that I've said everything I've said today, to find the money for a 6-month delay in this library thing, to give Sean the opportunity, because we just got this budget, to fix this situation with potential grants, so that we're not laying people off the library, we still have a good summer program for the library to do, and keep Latino support in our library, keep the doors open. Is there any way we can find 6 months?
Yeah.
How? Where?
So we need to be very aware. Yes, Sean's department has been lucky at grants. There's no guarantee that there's a grant out there.
Right, that's why we give it the 6-month cutoff. And this may not work, I'm just throwing this out there. If we just got this and Patrick has to do these layoffs, if we could find a way of extending it just a little bit so that we can try to fix this, is it possible?
Where would you like to make the cuts for that money? I mean, that's the question.
Close apart. Close apart, use a contingency, let us be at 15%.
We can't do that.
Well, we have to wait for the
We
budget.
can go back to the council. Retire for another 6 months,
But you can do,
some of them have benefits, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So what did you say? I missed it.
I don't think it can happen because benefit situation, and you just can't say you can work for 6 more months and then we're gonna lay you off.
Well, yeah, we're telling them now that you can work for what, another week?
Discussions have already been had with most of our staff, they're aware.
All right,
Counselor, thank you for your creativity.
Any other discussion? Okay, so we have a motion.
I'm just gonna say, it's not a foregone conclusion. We could decide to do those overhead allocation transfers again. Specifically, it's because we feel so strongly about this right now in the community. We would be deciding not to do that. for the purposes of what we've already discussed, just making sure that we know that's what we're saying right now.
My concern with that is it'll get further into a mess if we don't do them. I mean, if we don't stop doing them.
I understand, but we're here discussing these type of things in more detail than we've ever had.
Oh, absolutely, and that's a positive thing.
We're going in with our
without a
eyes
doubt.
open.
But I feel like for the last, I'm in my 5th year on council, I feel like I've been lied to for 5 years. And, you know, we have to be able to trust one another. And I feel like you're on the right path. I feel like, you know, because all of us had issues with the interfund transfers. I think we definitely need to stop doing that. Breaks my heart, just like everybody else, about the library and about Ramon. It just absolutely kills me. But I think we have to get on solid financial footing and then figure out, you know, what we can do. But it does seem like a tiny amount of money, especially if we just want to bring one part of this 1.5 FTE back.
It's
Who wants to cut
inconsequential.
something? Who wants to give up something? You know, I mean, it's not our decision what you cut. It's, you know, it's your decision what you cut, but.
And I'll remind you, our department heads cut everything. They cut everything. The museum cut their exhibits, the museum. We cut it to the bone. I mean, HR took everything away. I mean, we cut everything to the bone. We cut cell phones. We were digging for quarters under the couch cushions.
Didn't Gerald say, I don't want to misquote you here, but didn't you say that if we continue this or practice, that we will not qualify for certain loans?
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, if we continue to do what we've been doing for however long, we're not gonna qualify for certain loans, and we need that infrastructure because we are not failing, but we are at capacity. We are headed towards failing. We've had DEQ violations since 2016. I mean, this is serious for our infrastructure in the city. This is serious for clean drinking water, and the sewage system. So, I mean, not even into transportation and stormwater yet, but it's a big deal. And I don't really want to have one extra day at the library and then not qualify for these loans that we're really gonna need for infrastructure. So, I mean, it sucks. I want the library to be fully staffed, especially on Saturdays. But I just can't see how we can, you know, mess up our loans for the huge projects. I mean, we have a $35 million plan for the sewer, $95 million plan for the water. Like, Gerald's got us like lined up, ready to go. I think we should, that's my 2 cents.
For really essential services.
And this is-
Water to flow
okay,
from the toilet.
So we have a motion to approve the City of Independence budget for fiscal year 23-24 by Nancy, seconded by Marilyn Morton. Councilor Morton, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? Did you get that, Ann? Yep.
Okay,
We have 2 more motions.
oh, excuse me, my mistake.
You want to do the second one? Or you 2 more motions.
Right.
I move to approve the levying of the city's full tax rate of 4.5897 for her $1,000 assessed value.
I'll second.
Again, just for discussion purposes, I know this has to happen to keep us afloat, but boy, we pay a lot of taxes to live in Independence. We pay a lot of taxes to live in Independence. I don't care about West, I pay more on 7th Street in Independence than most people in West Salem do, so I really honestly do. Look, I can show you a picture of my taxes. It's really hard.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Get that amendment?
Nobody else is willing to make a motion here? I move to approve that the city impose taxes in the amount of $233,549 for general obligation bonds.
Second?
I don't know what this is, I'm sorry.
What a general.
What is this motion here?
I can kind of summarize, Chair. Do you remember the discussion about our debt and the general obligation bonds that are in place to, for some of the things that we have done previously? This is our debt. And so we have to levy for those funds. The taxes have to be paid for that. It was voted in by the taxpayers some time ago. I don't know how long, Chief, you know how long ago? 6 years ago or something.
So this is already something, this is something we do every year.
Yeah.
8 or 9 years old, isn't it? Something
Is it
like
8 or 9 now?
Thank you.
Again, just because I like to say this, we pay a lot of taxes for this fluff and independence. I wish we could really try to look at the people who live here and the struggle it is to live here.
We all live here. I think we realize
So you work for the government, I mean, you work for the state, and a lot of people here work. All I'm saying is you probably.
So Don, I just want to clarify, I am among the lowest
Can I
employed
finish?
state
Because I
or
didn't
lowest paid.
argue
Okay,
with
so we're
anybody
gonna call for
this
question
All I'm
of
saying
fixed
is the
income.
taxes are high, and
Thank you.
it's unfortunate that we have to
Thank you,
keep raising
Councilor
these
Rose.
things.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions?
You really get so bent out of shape anytime I say anything.
No,
You do.
I get bent out of shape every time you insult me.
Please don't make assumptions, council.
Committee.
We have one more.
Excuse
We
me,
have
could you quit bothering the committee, please? Hello,
Ann?
hello,
Ann,
we're in the
we're
middle
not
of a
done.
meeting.
Okay, just trying to get.
We're in the middle of a meeting, thank you.
Thank you, it didn't appear that
Okay,
way.
committee, no.
No, we have to adjourn the budget committee meeting, and then we have to.
Oh, the urban renewal, that's right.
Okay, so I need a motion.
Move adjourn the budget committee.
Second.
I just said that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. The records show at 20:54, we are going to open call to order Urban Renewal Agency. Roll call, we're all still here. And I'm going to go ahead and, again, since Karen is not here, the approval of minutes, if you have any changes or questions about them, from last meeting, then let me know and I will get those on to Amanda and to Karen. Do we have, in item 4, review of agenda, you have no changes? No. Okay. Do we have any questions submitted? No. And which page are we going to now? I'm sorry, I had this in my head earlier.
Page 86.
Page 86. Page 86 in your budget books. Okay. And if you have anything to add or read to this?
This is actually Bob, as our budget officer.
Sure, so this is, there are no expected projects in this coming year, so the budget is to bring in the taxes that would normally have gone elsewhere into the urban renewal district and pay debt that the urban renewal district owes.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
That's good.
Do we have any public comment on the urban renewal district? Renewal projects? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Item 8 on the agenda is an action. Adam? Last page of your,
I move to approve the Independence Urban Renewal District budget for fiscal year 2023, 2024.
Second.
I'm sorry, who's second? Yeah, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Nan, you good? Yep. Okay. One more action item on that.
I move to approve that the district levy the maximum incremental tax revenue as provided under state law.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Yes, please.
Before we adjourn, can I exercise a moment of personal privilege?
You may.
Thank you. I wanted to take a moment, first of all, thank you to all of you for coming and doing this. This was not fun, it wasn't easy. Our community is gonna be better. We all learned things that we didn't know. Not all of them were wonderful, very few of them were wonderful. We have challenges, we know but we have good people who are helping us move that I know the comments that people made. We're all in sincere interest in what is right and moving our community forward. We're not alone in some of these challenges, but other people's challenges are other people's. And we're here doing what we all can do. Sometimes we have differences of opinion, we have different ways to get there, but everybody's intent, I take everybody's intent in the comments they made today to make our community a better place. We are here today and we're going forward. And I want to thank you for taking the time, the effort, the emotional energy to do the things that we've needed to do. And some are hard and some are uncomfortable. But we've all learned new things that we didn't know, or things were put together in different ways than we thought they were. But we are going forward. Good things are going to happen to Independence because we live in Oregon, we live in the United States. And that is by definition, all of those three levels, Independence, Oregon, and the United States, I believe in optimism. I can't help it. And so thank you all for the work you've put forth. Thank you for taking the time, and I appreciate all of you for what you do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dory, for serving as chair one more time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay.
We need a motion and a second, please. Can I get a motion and a second?
Move to adjourn?
Thank you. Second. Thank you.
Aye.